Ed, can I ask one last question? Do we have an expectation of numbers? Was there an RSVP, and do we have any kind of number count?
So we did get several people RSVPing, but we also included, I'd have to double check how many actually RSVP'd, because we also included the OCP support committee, the people who were on the last call who may or may not be able to show up, council, village staff. So all those people got the link, whether they'll log on or not, tough to say.
Okay.
But we are expecting, you know, I'd say at least a dozen to 15 people have confirmed they're interested.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could I get one of you just to try it out? So if you just Google Villa Valemount, it's Villa Valemount YouTube, and just see if the live stream is there.
Oh yeah, I'm on it right now.
Okay, perfect. Okay, then we're good to go.
Okay, I'm going to start letting people in.
Now, hold on, I got to change my name. Okay, hold on.
We're not in there, are we?
Yeah, just a minute. Hold on. Is this a- Hi guys, we're here, but it's dinner time, so I'm just going to put the video off, okay?
No problem.
Did you want to see? You want to see in there? Yeah. So I'm going to go like that.
Well, it even says we're live on YouTube up there, right? Fancy. Feels sophisticated.
Hello, everybody.
Good evening, Pete.
How are you guys?
Not too bad.
All right. So I'm
Try
probably going
number-
to do the same as Holly. I'll turn the video off for a little bit so you don't see me chewing on supper. So,
You
and
can
I'm
put
not
it
sure,
on.
not sure the timeline, but I'll have to jump out just before 7. I've got another meeting at 7 for.
No
No
worries. We'll
problem.
try to keep it short.
Okay.
Hi to everyone who's filtering in. I think we'll just give people a couple more minutes to log in here.
Next time you reschedule, can you pick a cloudy day?
I know, right? If only we could have that kind of foresight.
I'd be a millionaire.
Yeah. We have enough problems with technology, let alone that. What do you think, Amy? Wait a few more minutes?
Yeah, maybe we'll give people 1 more minute. So maybe just before we begin, I've just been muting people as they come in just so we can reduce some of the background noise. So feel free, if you have a question, feel free to come off mute, but just to eliminate the background noise, it's great if everyone can keep themselves muted. Feel free to pop on video or off video as you like. But I think, Jonathan, whenever you're ready, we can get started.
Okay, great. Everyone can hear me, I assume? Sound check. Excellent. Get some thumbs up there. So welcome, everyone. This is our second attempt at a virtual public open house for the Village of Valemount Official Community Plan, OCP, and zoning bylaw. And we've been at this process since June of last year. And we're fortunate to be at a place where we can reveal a lot of the directions of the OCP and the zoning bylaw and really get some concrete feedback, hopefully, from the public. We've been doing that as we go, but things are really starting to solidify now. And we're happy to be here and to be presenting the draft OCP and draft zoning bylaw to you all tonight. So we'll just do some round of introductions. We'll try to be quick because we want to really get to the question and answer period here. But in order for that to happen, we want you to know who we are. And we also want to give some background on some of the policy directions so that we can all be on the same page. So I'll pass it off to Megan for a brief introduction, Michael, Fraser, and then Amy.
Hello, everybody. My name is Megan Vicenti. I am the land use planner for the Village of Valemount and have been working alongside our group of consultants here who have been hard at work on our OCP and zoning bylaw. And I'm here to just make sure it aligns with all of the village bylaws and policies and all that kind of stuff, as well as help them engage with you folks, the community.
Thank you, Megan. My name is Michael Von Hausen. I'm helping manage the team. I have a background in planning, urban design, and land development. Thanks everyone for coming. We're excited about the opportunity to answer your questions and present the core of the plan. Thank you.
Go ahead, Amy. We might have just lost Fraser.
No problem. Hi, everyone. I'm Amy, and I've been working with the consultant team. I've been doing engagements. And so it's been nice to meet some of you when we were in Valemount previously. And it's nice to see so many people come out tonight. So thanks for joining us.
Oh, I see Fraser now. Sorry, Fraser. We're not on my screen. Nope. Fraser's having technical difficulties. Fraser Blythe is one of our urban designers and planners, and he's been a key policy writer and designer for the official community plan. while some of us have focused more on the zoning bylaw of late. And so we're happy to have him as well. He'll be chiming in a bit. Just in terms of protocol for tonight, I've been on, a number of virtual meetings over the last month and year as it is. And one of the things that's worked well is if people wish to speak so that we don't talk over each other, is to use the chat. You can use a term request to speak, or simply I have a question or a comment, and simply put that in the chat, and then we'll facilitate that as a queue function so that we ensure that we hear from you and that it's orderly so that no one is talking over each other. And in that way, if you have a question, you can just put it in the chat. If you're having trouble with the chat, feel free to speak out, and we'll coordinate that. So the chat function can be accessed from the administration panel, or I guess there is a shortcut. You can use your Alt-H button if you're into shortcuts. So we'll keep on motoring here. So tonight's agenda, as I said, an introduction and overview, some key discussion topics. So rather than going through the entire official community plan, kind of word for word or page by page, we're just focusing on some key topics. There's a lot more in the official community plan and a lot more in the zoning bylaw draft. However, we're going to try to keep it shorter tonight by focusing on these topics. So first, an acknowledgement of the Sim First Nation and the unceded territory of which the village of Valemount is located. So many plans. So the village has a lot of plans, like a lot of communities, strategic plans, village policies, childcare needs strategy, zoning bylaw, economic development plan. If you're at all involved in municipal government, you perhaps are quite overwhelmed that there's so many plans. And one of the things that helps with planning is hierarchy. So I'm a big believer in putting the OCP in its proper place, I say. So the OCP, the official community plan, is the highest level planning document in a municipality in British Columbia. And out of that should come all of the municipalities' other plans and documents and reports. So things like budgets should come out of the OCP vision. So if the OCP says something's really important, well then council, logically should provide money behind that objective or that goal or the policy in order to see it happen. And so use this simple hierarchy to show the importance of the official community plan as the community's key visioning document and key policy document to guide everything else. So where have we come and where are we now? As I mentioned, starting in June 2020, we initiated the project. Michael and I were out there walking with the community, with council, steering committee folks, and then we moved that through to August and then to September engagement week, which was very exciting. We wish we could be out there now. And then came the draft plan and consultation stage, which we're in now, just towards the end, where we do have a draft OCP and we're working on a publicly releasable draft zoning bylaw, which Megan and team have been working hard on reviewing the draft. Valemount, as we see it, faces 4 key challenges. I'll go through these quickly, but they're very important, I think, to set the stage for where the village is at and where it needs to go in the future. So number 1, flat population growth and aging infrastructure. These 2 things are difficult because as your infrastructure ages, your pipes in the ground, those are expensive to replace, and who's going to pay for them? Well, if you have to pay for those new additional expenses with the current population, then everyone has to pay more for basically the same thing. So there's a need somewhat to either have everyone pay more or perhaps spread that load over more shoulders and get a few more people in the village. Number two, there's a lot of vacant land. And what we have heard is that a lot of the vacant land is held by speculators who are not moving that land towards development. They're not adding houses per se necessarily. It's kind of on average, there are some that are, but there is still a lot of vacant land in the village. Housing affordability has been well documented by your housing committee. And a challenge is the seasonal tourism economy. It's your #1 sector, but it goes up and down with the seasons. And as a lot of tourism sectors have found, it's somewhat volatile with the COVID pandemic. So those are somewhat of the challenges. What are the opportunities? It's an attractive village, obviously. All of you, or many of you live there, and especially for creative entrepreneurs and mountain adventurers. We've received a lot of emails, even during this process, of folks that would love to move to the village. Unaffordable housing in places like Vancouver, Victoria, other places on the island or by the coast are pushing people out of the big centers, and they're looking for that alternative lifestyle, and Valemount is a great place for that. Remote work opportunities, they didn't begin with the pandemic. I believe they were accelerated with the pandemic. And so it's an opportunity for the village to take advantage of, perhaps, in some capacity. And the sharing economy, things like Airbnb, tourism economy, elements like that, the village strategically can take advantage and has, it appears in the past, taken advantage of some of those sharing economy and tourism economy opportunities. So just to be a little bit inspirational and perhaps sappy, and to show you what we've been up to, I put together a short little video here with some highlights of what we've been doing over the last few months, as well as some other just general videos that have been done of the area. So hopefully this works and the sound works. It's only a minute.
Now we'll hold, I'll hold on to you. No matter what this world will throw, it won't shake me loose. I'll reach my hands out in the dark and wait for yours to enter like I wait for you.
So thank you for entertaining that. I think it's appropriate at times to get excited and to celebrate what the village is and what it can be. And well, planning can be a little bit dry to some, so we hope that that just spruces it up a little bit. So as we said, the OCP is the long-term vision for the village. And what does it matter for the grizzly bear? What does it matter for you? Stay tuned and we will explain. So Amy, I'm going to pass it off to you to give a quick summary of our existing and previous engagements.
Thanks, Jonathan. So just quickly before I jump into an engagement update, Jonathan, I just want to point out you have a gray box on the right hand of your screen. I know a couple people have noticed that. So I'm not sure if that's something, if you have something open there, but just thought I'd point that out when I had a quick moment. But thanks again, everyone, for joining us tonight. As you can see on that slide Jonathan just had open, we've had a few previous engagements. We were lucky enough to come visit all of you in Valemount back in September. Unfortunately, we had to move online for our previous engagement in November, and we're back online again, but we're so glad all of you could join us tonight. All of our engagements we've done to date have been summarized in our What We Heard reports, which can be found on the village website. So I encourage you to check those out. Once we're done this round of engagement and we have our survey results completed by the end of March, then we'll be releasing another report as well. But we've had lots of fantastic feedback from the community and we've seen several themes emerge. So the main overarching themes that we've seen include things such as maintaining a village feel and sustainable growth, having housing diversity and affordability, connectivity and trails throughout the village, creating a parking strategy, maintaining a vibrant economy and fostering that, and a need for essential goods and services. So there's lots of themes we found, but those are some of the overarching ones. And again, you can find all those in our What We Heard report on the website. And I'll pass it back to you, Jonathan.
Excellent, thanks. Hopefully that gray box is gone. I've tried to reduce.
It looks better.
Okay.
We're getting some nods.
I can't see everyone's faces now, but that's okay. So we've established two key goals for the OCP, and they're fairly simple, but I think they're very important. What we heard in the engagement, as Amy articulated, was one, that this OCP shouldn't just be for new people coming here. Oftentimes when we speak about growth, everyone thinks, oh, you're just going to make the village for the new people. But what about the people that are already here? What are you going to do for us? We're the core of the village. We're the community. Yes, new people are welcome, and yes, we want to attract new people. But what about us? We heard, and so we established this #1 goal, which is enhance the village for residents. And one of the key components was affordable housing. And inclusivity was noted by council as a really key theme that they wanted us to address. And affordable housing has so many aspects of inclusivity, because if you are in the village and working in the village, but you can't afford to live there, it's a real struggle. And so that's why there's been a lot of work on affordable housing prior to the OCP, and we've just tried to build upon it and enable more affordable housing opportunities. So other things that we heard for existing village residents to enhance better internet, downtown parking solutions, safer Highway 5, flexible zoning, that it was too strict, and to keep that small village feel and to infill some of the vacant lands. And then the second goal was to attract the next wave of Valemount residents who want a lot of the same things as the existing residents in some ways, but perhaps in a little different way. People that want that mountain lifestyle, they do require some level of affordability in housing. High-speed internet is obviously a must nowadays to attract more people, and amenities and that sense of community. So we articulated that within 14 key priorities for action, and I won't go through them all, but these focus on things like parks and trails, focus on filling in the vacant lots, focus on infrastructure planning so that you align future development with where there is already infrastructure, so that the village is economically and financially sustainable. protecting sensitive environmental areas, and linking the highway to downtown. That was a really key piece too. Potential upgrade to the 5th Avenue intersection that with the highway, which everyone knows is an issue. We've even received some kudos from the RCMP for highlighting that, although it is an interjurisdictional matter with the province. And so it's challenged in that way, in that there's a lot of people that need to cooperate, and someone needs to pay for it ultimately, whatever the solution is. So what are the keys to success? So how do we achieve those goals and achieve those priorities? And I'll go through these rather quickly, but they do underpin how we have evaluated each sector of the OCP. So each section within the OCP is scored based on how it fulfills one of these key ingredients for success. And not every section will address each one, but as a collective, they create this successful veil mount, we feel. So stores, obviously, that's a huge component. Housing diversity, meet the needs of residents and future residents, and as residents age. If they don't have to move out of the community, that's a really good thing a lot of times. Fun places are key to a successful village. Jobs, obviously, and sustainable tax revenue. It pays for what people need and want today and into the future. So those are the keys to a successful veil mount. And you'll see within the OCP, this theme and these colors repeated within each section as each of the policy sections is evaluated on how they fulfill these. So we're now going to get into these 5 key topics, and hopefully Fraser's got his mic back on, so I'm going to pass it off to him for key topics 1 and 2.
My mic is back on, I think. Hopefully you can all hear me. Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. Yeah, so I'd like to talk a little bit about accessory dwelling units, and this is one of the kind of not bigger ideas, but one of the key components of the OCP as well as the zoning bylaw. So an accessory dwelling unit is just a smaller independent living unit on a property. So it can be, a basement suite, or it can be part of a house. All of these are already permitted in Valemount. The only one that we're really adding that's new is a detached accessory dwelling unit. So that's a new kind of form of it. And then part of what we've been discussing with staff and with council, and hopefully we're going to touch on that tonight, is just some of the uses that would be permitted within that. So the benefits of these are that they can be a mortgage helper. They can help if you've got a house, you can develop a suite, and that can help go towards your mortgage. One of the things we're looking at within accessory dwelling units is whether they should be allowed to be rented out short term, so as an Airbnb model, and what some of the restrictions around those might be. And I know some of you might, think about an accessory dwelling unit and say, that's not really for me. I think, some of the benefits are that it adds an affordable housing option. So there are people in the community that would be really attracted to something like this. It helps retain and attract young people. It also diversifies the types of housing you have. So you've got a lot of single family dwellings in Valemount right now. So this just adds a different form. And presents some economic opportunities, as we discussed, for landowners. So our OCP says that these types of units would be supported in all residential and mixed use areas. You'd only be allowed 1 per lot. And there is a requirement in the OCP that we address affordable housing. So this is one way to help us get there. As far as how that's regulated, what the rules are, the zoning bylaw, again, kind of says some of the same things as the OCP. You're only allowed 1 per unit. They can be both attached and detached. We've got some parameters around size, and then we're still working through our discussion on required parking, whether one per unit is good or whether there should be more if the ADU is bigger. So I think we'll open it up to a few questions now. If you want to ask a question, if you're watching on YouTube, you can type it into the chat and Megan can either jump in or just let us know there's a question there. And then alternatively, if you're on the Zoom call here, you can ask a question. These are some of the questions we have. I can go through them, or you can choose which one you wanna answer. So maybe we'll start at the top. Are there any comments about allowing accessory dwelling units in all mixed use and residential neighborhoods in Vilna? Nothing, doesn't sound like anything.
Okay, we can keep moving, and then they can ask questions at the end of the presentation too. So.
Sure. Okay, well, why don't we do that? So just take a quick look at these questions and put those in your mind for the end of the presentation. So vacation rentals, another hot topic that we heard in Valemount. You know, pretty common challenge in most communities. I don't know that any communities really figured it out. So we've tried to develop some recommendations that incorporate best practices, but also, you know, incorporate feedback we've heard from council and from staff to date. So, you know, it is a challenge because there is a demand for this. People do, when they come to Valemount, they want to stay in their own place with their own kitchen and be able to cook. But there is a challenge on long-term rental availability. So, you know, people who are buying houses just specifically to rent them as Airbnbs, that takes away from the housing stock, makes it removes long-term rental and, you know, just removes houses off the market that maybe a local would be interested in buying. You flip there, Jonathan. So our OCP says currently that they wouldn't be permitted in the RN1 areas. So this is kind of the core neighborhood from 9th north, kind of the established neighborhood, unless the owner of the building is in part of the building. So more like a B&B style rental. In the areas that are less developed, RN2 and RN3 in the southern area of town, those would be permitted outright. As far as how that's regulated, you currently have regulations in your zoning bylaw that says in order to do a whole house vacation rental, your property needs to be 1,500 square meters, which is about 16,000 square feet. And again, something we're working on developing is whether accessory dwelling units can be rented as a vacation rental and what some of the regulations around allowing that would be. So again, some of the key questions we've been asking council and staff and we want to put to you is, should short-term vacation rentals be permitted in accessory dwelling units? And if so, would that only be in attached? So basement suites or parts of a house, or could they be permitted in detached accessory dwelling units? And then should there be a limit on how many new vacation rentals are built in those RN2 and RN3 areas?
So some fodder to think about. Either, you know, you can ask your questions now or stay quiet now and hum and haw on them and ask them later. You would like, or provide your opinions. Doesn't look like we have any requests to chat.
So I'll just quickly jump in there. Just a comment, not a question necessarily, but Jen on YouTube has just typed into the chat that she does support ADUs, but questions whether or not short-term vacation rentals should be allowed.
Mhm.
Maybe I'll jump into, I've got a few more comments on the YouTube that I'll just pass up here. So John Grogan is concerned about the negative effects on the community fabric of short-term rentals, and also concerned about ADUs on small lots. So I guess that's something maybe to think about is whether or not there's a minimum lot size that would be required to permit an ADU or something like that. And he just mentions as well that this mindset does not address a world with pandemics. That's all I've got for now.
There are two additional questions in the chat box. One from Alan. What's the rationale for the 1,500 square meter cutoff? And the second, Curtis asked, in ADUs, can parking be accessed via the alley, not the main street? So those two questions are
I can speak
straightforward.
I can speak to both of those actually.
Thank you.
So the 1,500 meters squared cutoff for short-term vacation rentals as the principal use is what we currently have in our existing zoning bylaw. And the main rationale for picking that number originally was to make sure that all parking and that kind of thing was able to be accommodated on site. And particularly here in Valemount, we get a lot of snowmobile tourism. So there tends to be a lot of large vehicles that come to our short-term vacation rentals. So that was the thought originally in creating the 1,500 meters squared minimum lot size for the principal use short-term vacation rentals. And we have kind of, done our best to try and test, ask the community, do you think this is working? Do you think this is not working? Do you support this policy? Do you not? And in general, it sounds like for people who are supportive of short-term vacation rentals as a principal use, they think that a 1,500 meter square lot is a reasonable size for that kind of use. What it also does is it does exclude most of your average size town lots from being able to do that. So it's a way to limit that use from being allowed just everywhere as well. So it's a bit of a control mechanism in that way. As far as accessory dwelling units being accessed via the alley, this is something that's still being discussed, but it is definitely something that's high up there. And we have certain staff members that are supportive, certain staff members that have raised some concerns. And what we're thinking, although none of this is set in stone, is that perhaps we will just say that access to an accessory dwelling unit will be determined / approved on a case-by-case basis, and it will be done based on making an assessment of the actual property that's being proposed for an ADU. And the reason for that is sometimes there's concerns about even things like low-hanging power lines or snow removal priorities and that kind of thing, because we have not historically really made a ton of use of our lanes. So it's definitely something, it's a great question. And it's something we would like, I think we're seeing that it would be nice to be able to use our lanes a little bit more. It's a wonderful asset that we have as the village, but at this point, it's looking like it'll be judged on a case-by-case basis as opposed to a blanket yes or no.
Yeah, and Megan, just to add to that, I wonder if we can speak a little bit to the bookends of the pros and cons to short-term vacation rentals and the 1,500 square meters, and then as well ADUs. So back to some of the opportunities and challenges of the village, the vacant lots of the village represent a lost opportunity cost. So you have, in those vacant lots, you have pipes running past the lot, which the village is paid for, in which the village isn't collecting any taxes off of that lot because it's vacant. So without having to build new pipe, one of the most affordable things the village can do to try to be financially sustainable is to see opportunities for taking those vacant lots and putting development on them. And in an ideal world, you know, they're just developed with new residents, and your community builds out kind of naturally. But when things seem to be slower, then we look from a policy perspective of what can we do, and what economic opportunities can we allow landowners. And one of those is ADUs. And the thinking is perhaps if ADUs are permitted, maybe that will turn the tide a little bit and get some of those vacant lots developed because the economics would be more favorable. However, balancing that is our number one goal, which is to enhance the village for residents. So if we're, you know, encouraging these policy for ADUs and looking at policy for short-term vacation rentals, how do we do that while maintaining the village and enhancing it for existing residents while also encouraging it for new residents? And so it's a real balancing point, because there are, you know, as stated, there are some negatives to short-term vacation rentals and some negatives to ADUs, but there's also benefits. And so we're really trying to balance those two. And I really just wanted to express a little bit of that kind of bookend. You know, there's always pros and cons to every policy decision, and we're trying to weigh a lot of different things here. And it's obviously each person is going to sort of be on that spectrum in a different place. So we really want to respect that we're going to have, and we're going to hear a variety of opinions on that. So Michael or Fraser, am I articulating some of those pros and cons? And Megan?
Yeah, I think so. It's planning's always really complicated, as you see. You want to provide this flexibility, but you don't want to open the floodgates. So it is something that we've been discussing with council and again are working through. So that's why we're here tonight, to get your comments too and help refine our decision making. I think Amy will probably touch on the survey at the end too. So that's another opportunity to give feedback, and there's questions in there as well. I did just want to touch quickly on the question around lot size and ADUs. So generally that'd be regulated through zoning, and there's a couple ways to do that. One is just to make a specific zone that allows ADUs. So if you were in a single family zone, you'd have to rezone to single family ADU as a specific zone. Some other regulations around that are lot coverage. So, you know, as soon as you add an accessory dwelling unit, if it's detached, you've increased your lot coverage, and within zoning, there are limitations to that. And kind of the big one always is parking too. So if you're building an accessory dwelling unit, you would have to provide parking on the property. And whether that's accessed from the alley or the side street or the main street, that all forms the zoning bylaw.
Exactly. And also to the 1,500 square meters regulation, in that, as you see, there's been, you know, some significant benefits to that rule. And in our team stayed in one of the beautiful dwellings in the south there, and we were able to provide an opportunity for the local developer there to benefit from our stay, and we really enjoyed it. And so, you know, you see that development, that subdivision in the south, and you see it undertake new growth in the community, which is good. And the question that we have as a team and that we've posed to staff and council is yes, you know, that's good there, but what if all of the vacant land in the village developed as 1,500 square meter lots for short-term vacation rentals? In that scenario, we wouldn't have new residents in town, but you would still have increased tax base. You would still get development on, on land that you don't have. So that would be a benefit. However, you wouldn't get that permanent population increase. So it's a balance, and we're really trying to look at that. We're looking at things like perhaps a percentage maximum of the vacant land being used for future short-term vacation rentals. Is there a role for saying, of that kind of missing middle, a certain percentage, should be maxed out for short-term vacation rentals, so that you could have more subdivisions like in the south, but you wouldn't have all of it. You would have to leave room for permanent residences there. So that's some of the things that we're toying with. What the numbers are always tricky. The principles, a lot of people can agree on, but when you start putting the numbers on paper, it gets more challenging. But that's what we're here for. So there's a comment too in the chat that I see about wood smoke, and this is a somewhat unique to Vail Mountain area concern. And Megan, perhaps you can speak to this here in terms of, are there any mechanisms when you're adding new dwelling units in the community that it doesn't subsequently add to that air quality concern? And I know there's just a new task force, I think, initiated there. So is there a way to address that?
Yeah, unfortunately, I have not been personally involved very much in that arm of what the village is working on, but I do know that there are definitely strides, and like there's a lot of focus on it right now. There's a wood stove exchange program to try and get some of the older, less efficient stoves basically decommissioned and get people some subsidies to get new stoves. And then I know there's other stuff going on, but unfortunately I'm not crazy knowledgeable about it. But I do think it's a very good point, especially here in Valemount. If we're going to be adding any kind of density, we have to consider the impacts of additional wood smoke, because we don't have natural gas here. So it will be a problem until we have an alternate method of heat that is affordable for people. And yeah,
there's that geothermal idea, right?
That would be great.
So we should, in the interest of time, let's just see, try to move on, but I don't want to also cut off discussion, because we do want enough time for discussion. So I just want to, Kelsey had a comment in the chat.
I'll just sneak in quickly with one comment, just so we don't forget about our YouTube audience. Jen, who commented earlier, she did just add to her comment that she would not support short-term vacation rentals in detached ADUs in the core residential areas. Mm-hmm. And I'll be keeping notes of all the chat. So this is great discussion happening, everyone. Please do add comments, and if we don't directly address it or we skip over something, we'll make sure we have a note of it.
Thanks, Amy. So Kelsey's idea, which is quite interesting, and so she states one of the ideas we were talking about in the past was creating short-term vacation rental permits based on population or growth contraction. So that would be somewhat of a percentage or a linkage to, if the village is at X population, then the community would allow X number of short-term vacation rentals, and that number would go up if the population went up, and it would lower as a percentage does if the population went down, to try to get at this idea of you want to maintain a core permanent population base. So that's something we can consider as we move forward. I think it's worth some further discussion. So we're going to move on to Parks and Trails. I'm going to pass this off to Michael to briefly explain some of our big ideas on Parks and Trails.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thanks, everyone, for asking questions. This is one of those big ideas that we explored when Jonathan and I and the rest of the team were living in the South. We walked up Dogwood. We walked the entire village, the Bigfoot Trail, etc. And one of the things that we found was there's an incredible opportunity to finish the links in your community. In other words, linking the mountain to Cranberry Marsh, we found that Dogwood was a natural spine, and you'll see in the next slide one of the early ideas that we came, creating really a trail network, making, building on the reputation of Valemount as the key cross-country biking capital of British Columbia. I think it has that incredible potential. So linking the Cranberry Marsh to the downtown, which is on Dogwood, creating a loop up Ash. So as we walk, we always want variety. So creating grand loops as well as smaller loops within the community, connecting the parks to your home. So one of the principles that we're using is that every residential lot would be within 400 meters of a public park or open space. And in so doing, we'd also create links between the existing residents and these existing and future park spaces. So as we infill the additional properties to the south and the mid part, what we call, ironically, the missing middle, that within those areas, the developers will be required to provide trails following, as you know, what we observed in our walks was these incredible desire lines through existing vacant property. Then in fact, those are patterns to build on, so they fit within the desire lines for the children going to the elementary school, the teenagers going to the high school. And so the village becomes highly interconnected. And when visitors come, we have an expression called park once. In other words, they're on their bikes or walking the entire time versus adding pollution to the village by driving everywhere. And finally, new recreation facilities should be located in the heart of the community, closest to the majority of residents. So the core population, one of the things, and the tenants that Jonathan pointed out, is that we should improve the village for the village residents first. Next slide. This is a photograph I took on the south part of Dogwood, and you can see this again. The right-of-way is in place. The question is, what goes on that undeveloped right-of-way? Let's take a look. So there's a possibility for, again, a soft surface trail, increased landscape, trees, etc. So it really becomes an amenity space and a true connector for local residents and visitors, both for bicyclists and walkers and hikers. So it's the Marsh to Mountains Trail. So a couple of questions here to think about. Number one, do you support the Dogwood Marsh to Mountains Trail? And number two, what amenities do new parks need to provide? In other words, what are those things that aren't provided in existing parks? For instance, Centennial Park, which is the central park in downtown, or other parks. Where are there voids in the community? What do we need more of?
Thanks, Michael. You can leave a few seconds here, see if there's any questions, and then we've got a few more topics to move on. I'm cautious of our time as well. So a comment, we need more access to washrooms. And I think it is kind of a funny thing, but it also, as someone who's had young kids for a decade now, and I shake my fist at every washroom in my community that is closed most of the year. When your child has to go, and they have to go when they have to go, that's the problem solver, and it's an essential service, I would say. And so, yeah, I wouldn't underestimate the need for washrooms, especially it encourages people to stay longer at parks. They don't have to go home every so often. They can stay there and linger, and that builds community, I would argue.
Yes, just to echo that, I work on a lot of small downtown plans, and I remember in High River, when we had a big public meeting, this was before COVID, and someone said, almost pleading with me at the beginning of a public meeting, they said, please, Michael, the first gesture that we need is a public washroom in the downtown. When people have to go, they've got to go. So it's a small thing, but it's a huge thing that provides incredible value for a small investment. Thank you.
There's a few comments here in regards to paving Dogwood, that it's presently muddy. Yes, we were there on a rainy day biking. Curtis says old asphalt pad beside the curling rink is currently not being used for anything. Should be developed into a pump track or skill zone for youth.
Excellent.
Those are getting popular. Actually, Calgary's selling off some of their portable skate parks if you want a deal. As a side note, John Grogan says toilets, sidewalks, water stations. Also essential services. Leave your house. Benches and trash dog waste stations. That's another kind of key essential that needs to be a certain distance. I think there's a theory in Fraser and Michael that if you can't see a garbage receptacle, some people, for better or worse, they'll drop it on the ground, or they get upset. But if you can see one, people are much more apt to deposit their garbage where they should.
Yes.
Safer access onto steep trails, stairs to the Swift Feet Trail, more dog waste stations, and that gets at this inclusivity. And not every trail will be for everybody, but as much as possible, society is moving towards making sure that people have access to those things equally, regardless of ability.
I did just want to touch on that question about paving, because I know one of the questions that came up as we discussed trails, when you look at that map, it's a pretty extensive system of trails. So the question about cost came up, and I think it's important to understand that this is a long-term vision, and not everything's going to happen at once. But the trails themselves can evolve. So you might have, rather than paving the trail first, you can have a gravel path that as more residents come and you can gather more income from taxes, then you can kind of have a long-term plan to pave that. So it's not like, you need to build exactly what's there right away. Those trails, along with the landscaping, can evolve over time. And that's a way that the trail system can grow with the community naturally. So that's, one of the things you can look at rather than just jumping right in with both feet.
A few more comments here about washrooms and the pandemic and the self-sustaining washrooms. I know that is a concern in terms of exposure to COVID, the use of public washrooms and the cleaning frequency that is required now, and the cost of that on the village could be a concern for those public amenities. However, they're needed more than ever because we're more in our communities than ever we were. People aren't traveling afar, so they're using their own communities more. And so that's maybe a new area of research. What's the increased cost to cleaning public facilities like that? But as we said, they are essential. Maybe a designated dog park. A lot of communities have those. Curtis is speaking to a great project that's going on regarding the Centennial washrooms. Megan, perhaps speak to that a bit.
Again, it's Silvio's project. It's our economic development officer has been working on that for some time now. And I think that there's been some movement recently about it's looking like it's going to happen, and to upgrade the washrooms at Centennial Park, which would be great. I don't have many more details than that. I just know that it's underway.
And another comment regarding waste, and this time along the Swift Creek Trail, in regards to Richard, who's saying that there's a lot of waste along his property and spends a lot of time on maintenance there. So definitely a concern that could be addressed. We're going to keep moving on here in the interest of time. Thank you so much for all your questions and comments. So I'm going to pass it off to Fraser here. Fraser, give us a little rundown on the idea of mixed use.
Yeah, so part of what we're proposing is to allow more flexibility in how commercial land is used. And our main proposal is through mixed use development. So mixed use really means buildings that have both a commercial and a residential component, typically commercial on the ground floor and residential above. But you know, it might happen where you've got commercial along the street front and residential in the alley. So there's a couple different ways to put that all together. The benefits of this is that you get not only a commercial unit, but you also get residential units. You know, this benefits the city in a couple ways. One is you've now got more contributors to that infrastructure. So rather than having just a commercial business, you know, maybe that sits empty for a couple months, but at least you've got the rest of your, you know, the apartments above that filled with people that are contributing rent and also, you know, paying taxes on that help pay for the water, sewer, and roads that run by the property. So as a property owner, it's a much more efficient way to use the land and a better bang for your buck, as they say. Again, it gets to that component about adding housing diversity. So, you know, it might be something you look at and say, well, I'm not really interested in living in an apartment. But I think there are people in the community where that would be really attractive, especially if there was an option to own or have a long-term rental there. Yeah, and just as that bottom point notes, there's greater property taxes per acre than just these single-use developments. So we are proposing in the OCP to permit it in the kind of the village center mixed use, and then the commercial village center mixed use area. So kind of the red areas there, as well as that purple area that's off screen. So these are the three mixed use areas within the village, and the OCP is proposing to permit mixed use in all those areas. The zoning bylaw, we've kind of consolidated some of the commercial zones and allowed mixed use within them. So again, these might allow accessory dwelling units, accessory commercial units, and it just, you know, adds that flexibility in terms of how the property is used, both for commercial and residential.
And the one thing that we did here was that within the Fifth Ave downtown core, that the streetscape maintain a commercial look, so that the residential buildings, as Fraser said, would have to be either above or behind. However, in the Main Street mixed use area that's being proposed, that wouldn't be a criteria, that if the residential component wanted to be in front or beside the commercial unit, then that could be possible, because it does have a more eclectic mixture over there in Main Street. And so we're open to ideas on that, but that's the draft presently.
And so one of the questions we're weighing, as Jonathan mentioned, there's quite a bit of vacant land. And, you know, if we understand that this is an efficient use of land, should there be, this is on the next slide, I believe, Jonathan, should there be incentives? So are there ways that the village can incentivize this type of infill downtown? And if so, what should those be? So I've got a loud house. So.
Open to comments, questions, feedback on this topic. There's already been a few comments in the chat. Just to catch up a little bit, there were some comments about the need for dust control. A comment that the residential units in mixed use developments are not single detached. They provide housing diversity. the need for Dogwood South dust control, as it's not pleasant walking without it. And that older towns such as Fernie's downtown have a lot of mixed use developments. I was there a few times this past, in 2020, and definitely true there. And some support for it. And a comment, would like to dive into this perhaps a bit. In Railtown with mixed use, aren't we creating an area inaccessible for artists in the regulations change for public buildings? Might have to explore that a little bit with Eugene. I don't quite understand, but perhaps Megan knows more on that. And Kelsey provided a photo of some of the mixed use in Fernie, I believe. And a comment, yes, I think it should be incentivized, the mixed use downtown, maybe delayed of taxes or waiving of development cost charges. So a financial incentive for development would be less taxes or less development cost charges. And some other support for encouraging development incentives. So what some communities have done in their downtown for incentives is a scaled tax payment increment. So for example, year one, if someone invests and there's typically a geographic area plus a minimum investment, could be $100,000, could be $50,000, could be higher than that. Canal Flats has one that's $50,000. The geographic area of downtown. Year one, the development pays zero taxes, and then it has an increment up to year 7, where year 7 it's back to paying full taxes. That's just one example. They're very encouraging of development as they don't have the downtown that you have. And so that's, one end of the spectrum, and the other end of the spectrum is to ensure that that developers pay their fair share, let the market do its thing. And everywhere in between, the village could create different sorts of incentives depending on the will of the community and council.
There is a question about whether tourist accommodations would be permitted as part of that. I think, I don't know, in my opinion, that would just fall into a commercial use. So there's nothing requiring you to have commercial and residential in this zone. You could do a completely commercial building. So in that setup, it would be more like a hotel or a boutique hotel kind of setup.
Michael, you've done a lot of downtown planning. Any thoughts, ideas, comments?
Well, the magic of, I noticed it right away when I walked the center of the village of Valemont, is that it's so wonderfully scalable and walkable because it's only 1 to 2 blocks. And the magic of a compact downtown is actually 2 blocks. That's the length that people will walk. So I think you have a great core to build on. And part of that mix is, I always do an observation where I see people on the street. And if you bring a resident, that increases the pedestrian volume twice, and people feel safer and more comfortable with that. So, grow right in the right place. I think the core is wonderful. You have an IGA, save the IGA in the core, got a great coffee shop, you got a hardware store. Those are anchors that you don't want to lose because that's all part of essential services. And then building on the wonderful other uses in the downtown, the local stores, and keep, as we've set a priority, local businesses first. Many small downtowns are, one of the first things they do is maintain their existing businesses, a focus on maintaining their existing businesses and adding folks and also complementary businesses with the existing businesses there. I'm looking for obviously a bike shop in town, a trail shop, that kind of stuff. But even the hardware store provides some of that. So I think you've got a great core, call it great bones. You have to build muscle on those bones.
Thanks, Michael.
And maybe one thing Michael touched on that we should just highlight too is as you bring more residents downtown, you start to add vibrancy to downtown at different times of the day. So rather than it just being, a commercial area that at 5 o'clock everybody kind of goes home and none of the stores are open because there's no one there, by having people that actually live downtown, you start to support those businesses through a longer time throughout the day. So that's another key benefit of mixed use.
Yes.
For sure. And some comments in the chat, not supporting tax incentives, which is fair enough for sure, right? So it's just one option and an idea. So downtown parking, we've heard a lot about parking over and over again, and we weren't there during a busy time. We were there in June and September, and we weren't there during the snowmobile rush or the heavy July, August rush. Was also a pandemic year, so I'm sure there was a different influx of visitors this year, maybe more, maybe less, but likely a few less than normal. And so there's obviously challenges and opportunities with downtown parking. It's obviously probably heavily seasonal in that the time that we visited, there were days where you could definitely count the number of vehicles parking on one hand. And what we've heard is RVs and trailers are a challenge. When we did an analysis, the aerial photo showed 3 RVs taking up approximately 7 or 8 stalls. So they're taking up a minimum of 2 stalls themselves, which makes sense, how large they are. And that's taking away parking stalls available, especially some of the closer ones. Heard along the accessibility line, needing better accessible parking stalls. And as your community ages, which a lot are in Canada, this is an increasing need. And related to considering seniors, not only the seniors that have an accessible or a handicap parking pass, but those that may be on the cusp of it, but don't have it yet and still need that spot close to the grocery store, say, or close to the coffee shop. And parking is one of these things where it's a development cost. So the more you require developers to pay for parking and put parking stalls on their site, the less development you're going to get. However, if you don't require them to contribute to parking at all, then you're going to exacerbate your parking problem. So it's a balancing act for sure. And the village, on the one sense, needs to attract development to fill in those vacant lots, but also doesn't want to attract development that's going to make the situation worse, make the community worse. So here's a comment: stop staff from parking in prime zones for 8 hours a day. So we'll get at that. Almost every parking study I've ever read says one of the main problems is employees parking in front of where they work, rather than, and they park there 8 hours a day as noted. And so if you can get those employees to park in the less desirable spots for the customers, then it frees those spots up for the customers, because customers want to park in front of where they are accessing. So we have developed within the official community plan parking strategy to address downtown parking. It is part of the appendix, which means that it is directional and guiding, but does not solicit kind of a requirement of council. But that's sort of where the community is at, we believe, and we believe further decision-making and council budgeting would need to happen to enact that direction. And it addresses some of these elements that we've discussed. And so in terms of ideas, so this is at the idea stage, and I'll try to go through them left to right here. So on the left-hand side, there's a yellow note entry signage regarding parking. So this is a note that a larger signage and wayfinding strategy is likely needed in the downtown, especially if some of these other ideas come to fruition. Because when people are driving into Fifth Ave and say they have a trailer, they need to know where is appropriate for them to park. Otherwise, they're just gonna pull into the angled parking, take up 7 stalls, and all of the parking within that prime area will be taken up, as we've heard stories of. So that's an idea of entry signage, wayfinding. And then moving along, we've heard the need for this RV and trailer parking. So we've proposed within this guiding strategy an option B and an option A. So one option is along the south side of 5th, this red line. Another option is perhaps on the north side of 6th Avenue. It would need some paving improvements and some signage, of course. But it's the idea of, if you could give an appropriate place for the trailers and the RVs, then they wouldn't be taking up those prime spots. On the north side of 5th Ave, perhaps a no trailer and RV parking area, but free unlimited parking for others if there's some appropriate stalls there for at your average motor vehicle. Moving into the pink area here, the idea in this pink area is, because it is your prime block and a half, 2 blocks of downtown, more accessible stalls need. We looked at some of the existing ones, and it seems like my friend in a wheelchair would be rolling into the street because there's a slope on one. And so that wouldn't meet standard. And so there's a need for more accessible stalls. And in our council meeting, there's even the idea of designating some elderly stalls. And these are not legally required for only elderly folk, but I think the hope would be that communities would respect that signage, and young folk that have strong legs would not be parking there. And you wouldn't need that handicap parking pass to park in those locations. And so the idea as well then is, in this pink area, to have 3-hour maximum parking, to get at that idea that Curtis mentioned and that we've been discussing, which is, how do you get the employees not parking in downtown? Well, you could have a generous time limit, which would be this 3 hours, but it's less than what a shift is. So employees can't park there. They would be pushed to other locations a little farther away. And then some ideas of greater bike parking in the downtown to just really get that accessibility and that vibe up, that this is a place that is not only connected to the Valemount Bike Park, but also really embraces it. And then kind of on the bottom right of the pink area here is, there are some vacant lands within the downtown that perhaps the village could look at to lease for parking areas, maybe for the RV and trailer parking. Because the other thing we heard was the people driving those RVs, some of them are elderly and require to be closer to the shops. And so pushing them farther in this red area may not be suitable for everyone driving an RV. So cash in lieu for parking is the concept, and it's within your existing zoning bylaw, where if a developer is building a building and they don't have the room, or they don't think that it's reasonable for them to provide parking on site, they can provide money instead of parking on their site. And that money goes to a village fund to fund initiatives around the downtown and around parking. So the village, if development occurs, they would collect X amount of dollars per parking stall that wasn't provided. Currently, the number is $1,500 per stall. So if a builder needs to provide 12 stalls and they can only provide 2, there's 10 stalls they must provide cash in lieu. And so that's $15,000 the village would collect. And it could go to these cash in lieu priorities, which is an RV parking area, might be 6th Ave, it might be somewhere else, signage and wayfinding, accessible stalls and curb cuts. There's a lack of curb cuts for those in wheelchairs to even utilize some of the stalls along Fifth, and then perhaps money towards leasing an area for RV parking. So few comments in the chat here. I don't know, Megan, Fraser, Michael, and Amy, anything that I've missed in terms of what we've heard and directions?
No, Curtis has a question about enforcement, and this is something that's come up too. You know, how do you enforce it if there are parking bylaws? So what I've seen just from personal experience here in Revelstoke, we changed our parking time limits, and they just did a parking blitz. So they kind of let everyone know this is happening this week. You know, don't park there longer than an hour or you're going to get a ticket. And they did that a couple times throughout the year. And now it's just, you know, everyone kind of gets it. So it's not like you need to have enforcement, you know, 24 hours a day, every day of the year. You can kind of do it in focused blitzes, and it's a way to educate without being overly punitive. And there goes the Lego. Yeah, so it's a way to educate people without, you know, being heavy-handed in terms of enforcement.
And we did hear some positive feedback from our council workshop that we hadn't heard before around the idea of 3-hour parking. And this is where, going back to that hierarchy of the OCP in regards to other plans and budgets, is that if council really feels this is a priority, then they are somewhat compelled to implement that through budgets and initiatives that will make it happen. And we really heard, I think we heard a lot of support for some of these parking ideas. And the one was to get a little bit more serious on parking enforcement if this idea of a 3-hour parking maximum was implemented. And so that was interesting for sure for us, because this has been fairly controversial, we've heard. So
yes.
Megan, anything I've missed on that? You've been in this issue for longer than us.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm managing all the chats, so I'm not able to listen to everything that's going on, if I'm being perfectly honest. But I think everything I think we're all on the right track, and you're hitting it all on the head. Yeah,
Jonathan, just one thing about, I saw a comment about 20-minute parking actually in front of, you know, in front of the IGA or the liquor store. So it's simply, these are notes to say you're picking something up or you're picking somebody up. And these are short-term stalls, and those are, and we didn't talk about seniors or challenged people in terms of bringing those kinds of parking spaces, and we've discussed that. Very important is to have those select stalls in front of those key stores. So disabled, or again, there's disabled stalls and they're adequately provided in the downtown. I know there are a few now. But that detailed programming is so important to get the right response, right? It's more a respectful parking management regime, especially for visitors. They know where they are to go and where they don't go. And that's hugely important for out-of-towners, especially with big trailers and they're coming in. So if we can provide those clear, and that's where the wayfinding comes in, a clear messaging system of where you park and where you don't and for how long. I think that could be helpful. Enforcement could be friendly enforcement, like or the intimidation enforcement, a big pink sticker on your windshield, but it's simply a warning first and the next one is a ticket. So it's again, welcome to Valemount. Just be careful, because we want to be responsible in our parking management and respectful to our residents and our visitors.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Yeah, it was John who mentioned the 20-minute parking. Yeah. In front of the grocery store, perhaps, or 10 minutes in front of the liquor store, which is pretty popular.
Yeah.
In my community, if you go into one of these commercial complexes that has its own parking, that's what they do. In front of the liquor store, in front of the, the pizza shop, it's 15 minutes max.
Yeah.
If you're there, for something else that you're going to be longer, you're not parking in front of that 15-minute parking sign. So we know these are new ideas, and things like enforcement on parking rules haven't been needed a lot within the village. So that would be new, but it's really about making sure that the downtown you have really functions the way it's supposed to be.
Mhm.
And I think that's what Michael is getting at. And in the programming aspect, you really want it to function as it is intended to. So, if you're going to pick up a pizza, you don't need to be there. But if you need to park 3 blocks away to pick up a pizza, it's a little bit frustrating. But if you have to park 3 blocks away to go hang out at the pub, for the evening, maybe not such a big deal, or to go to a job. So just have to make sure that the dials are turned the right way, that it really functions in the proper way for the businesses, but also for, for residents, but also for visitors.
Good.
Any other comments in the chat?
I'll
Megan?
just jump in with one quickly from Jen on YouTube. She was asking, how does that red marked RV trailer parking relate to the SAS fees development plan for that lot, if it's still in place?
So the parking on the old high school site, it wouldn't actually be on the high school site. It would be on the village right of way that's adjacent to it. So not proposing to use any of the actual private property there. But if you look at where the fences are, there is public right of way that's not the actual roadway, but is the grass areas or dirt areas between the roadway and the private property, that we're just asking the question of, would this be an appropriate place to have RV or trailer parking, such that they could just pull in, they could make a right and a right, and then just pull in there with parallel parking, possibly. Maybe it's not the right place, which is why there might be some other ideas in terms of vacant land that could be leased, or on the north side of Fifth.
Yeah, and one thing that I'll just mention that I know I forget sometimes when thinking through all of these kinds of things is that, these things aren't necessarily forever. Like, things can be adaptable and can be changed over time. So like, I see, let's say we encourage large vehicle parking along that stretch of that vacant old high school property, SAS-FE property, whatever you want to call it. And let's say it works really well and we go, oh, wow, we don't have a ton of large vehicles in our downtown core. It's working really well. It's bringing people, it's letting them know where they can go. And then that property gets developed and that doesn't really work anymore. At least we're in the position at that point to say, hey, we know we need to find somewhere for these large vehicles because that worked really well to keep them out of our downtown core, although that specific location is no longer ideal. So I think it's important to think like, yeah, that property might get developed one day. And that's great if it does, and we'll make sure that our policies and layouts hopefully support that kind of development. So it's something that doesn't necessarily have to always be a forever decision. And I think if it works for now and for the next 5 to 10 years, and it can be even a trial for us to figure out if that's going to help solve some of our issues too. So just something to kind of bear in mind as we work through these things is that policies are dynamic, and we will and plan to and hope to evolve as things move and respond to things as they change. So yeah.
Excellent, Megan. I think that's a great way to phrase it. So I think you've already dove into some of these questions.
Mm-hmm.
And we are 5 minutes to 8 o'clock, so I want to respect everyone's time. We'll just show you quickly within the draft OCP that you can download. This is a key map. It looks somewhat busy here, but we want to make sure that it was evident what the different areas were. So these are the land use areas of the OCP. They're fairly broad they're not one lot or anything. There is in your existing OCP a little bit more of a patchwork quilt, so we tried to simplify it and try to make it more obvious what different areas were intended for. So you'll find this within the OCP. And within the draft zoning bylaw, which will be coming out for public consumption soon, there will be a new draft zoning bylaw map. So every property must have a zone. And so this is the presently sort of in process zoning. And we don't want you to confuse it with the more general OCP map here. But this is the specific zoning for each property that will be coming out. And largely the general pattern will be the same, and it will align with the directions of the OCP. It must legally. But there is, as you heard, going to be more flexibility in some zones. And we're going to keep chewing on some of the issues that we've discussed around ADUs, short-term vacation rentals, mixed-use zoning, and the like. So we'd like to thank you for your time. If anyone wants to stay and ask questions, you're definitely welcome to. We'll be on the line as long as people want to discuss and chat. I'll just pass it off maybe to Amy if there's any comments that we've missed or that we need to discuss from the YouTube chat.
I think we've covered a lot of them, but as Jonathan said, people are welcome to stick around and join in for a Q&A with us. I know a few people have had to log off early, so I just want to mention that we are available by email. If anybody has any more pressing questions and you want to get in touch with us, please feel free to reach out at ocp@valemount.ca. Also, we've got quite a few things on the village website right now. So we have our draft OCP. I know a few of you have probably dove in there and had read through already. But if you haven't, that's available to view, as well as this PowerPoint that we have on here tonight. So if there's any ideas you want to revisit or concepts, you can always download a PDF version of the PowerPoint and have a read through that. And also, I'm going to pop the survey link into our chat function right now for those of you who are joining us on Zoom. And that's live. It's open until March 26th. So any questions or comments you have or anything on the OCP, you can add that into the survey. We also have a few targeted questions in there. So we appreciate all your feedback. Of course, we've been saving all the notes from tonight and recording this presentation, so we can always revisit your great comments tonight. And this presentation is going to be airing on VC TV starting on Wednesday as well for about 2 weeks, I want to say. So if anybody missed it tonight, let them know they can catch it on there. And Jonathan, I'll pass it back to you.
Excellent, thanks. So as we said, you're welcome to stay and we'll answer some questions. Michael first and then Megan, any final remarks?
No, I really enjoyed this interactive. The chat box worked really well. It was smooth. We worked through the presentation. It wasn't about us. It was about the village of Valemount and their wonderful residents. So I really enjoyed this. This was a learning experience for me, and exactly what we wanted to do here tonight. And the results, I think, will inform any modifications or again discussions with council and staff. Thank you so much for joining us. It was a real pleasure.
Thanks, Michael. Megan, any final thoughts?
Not really anything for me. It makes me very excited to see people be engaged. This is more a conversation than we've had in some while, so it's great to see. I'm just gonna ask one question that John's asking in the chat here, which is whether or not it will be aired on VCTV unedited. I'm not sure what the answer is.
Yeah, that was my intention. I think at the beginning, I may have started it a couple minutes early, which may get shaved off just in the interest of time. But I'll be chatting with Michael at VCTV. We originally had budgeted for an hour time slot, so we might have to adjust the times of when that will be aired with him, but I'll follow up with him tomorrow morning and we'll discuss new times, and we'll make sure we get that out to the public via our email list and social media and the village website. And also just wanted to mention as well that we do have paper copies of the survey available at the village office for those who don't want to log onto our online survey. And of course, if you require a paper copy and can't get down to the village office, please do let us know. We're happy to get that to you however we can.
Excellent. Any other questions, comments? We have some time.
I'm talking on mute. Corey has a question about, and I had mentioned this, I think, to Jonathan and Fraser, I can't remember, at one of our meetings last week, about a couple of the properties in Railtown. And I just think it's maybe a good example to kind of maybe explore, just so that people have a better understanding of what some of these mixed use zones mean, especially in Railtown, since it's a little bit unique. So Corey, so the properties are, it's the, I don't know, Corey, you can jump in if you want.
Sure. Yeah, it's the two properties on Main Street. It's 1280 Main and 1290 Main. So it's the ones between the hotel and the seniors center. So, and we had recently gone through a large rezoning process for those 4 lots. So
yeah. Yeah, so we had kind of had a conversation. So one of them was we had rezoned it to a zone that was called P4, which was a public institutional, like college campus university zone, which also allowed for residential uses that often come along with college and educational uses like that. So that was one example. So that was one of the, it's a vacant property. And so one thing, I think we had looked at it and determined that it's permitted within the new zone as well to have an educational facility as well as residential uses. They can both be the principal use or a secondary use. So that's kind of one example, Corey, of like the zones are changing, but we're taking into consideration what was there before, especially for recent rezones. And making sure that we're not going against something that somebody recently went through or recently paid for to be allowed to do, especially.
But it's good to bring those up to us for sure, because we don't want to miss anything. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I think is helpful with the zoning bylaw is try to simplify it. They've gotten quite complicated over the years, but in that simplification, we don't want to miss things. We don't want to oversimplify and thus miss the nuance of a specific site. And so it was good that you alerted us to that, so we could look into it, make sure that any existing, what some people call like entitlements, are carried forward, so that you have at least what you had before and hopefully more ability to develop in the future.
Yeah, and it's hard at this phase too, because we've got the OCP draft out, but we don't have the zoning bylaw draft out, so people can't see the definitions and the permitted uses and stuff. So it makes sense that these questions are coming up now, but they don't have all the answers because we just don't have all the pieces quite yet. So it's good, yeah, good to ask these questions for sure.
And you touched on what I've been waiting to hear, is in the zoning map and the use of the properties. Particular, my property is environmental. It was urban reserve in the current, and which is going to be the previous one, and when this new one comes into effect. The previous one was allowing for my property to be divided into 3 chunks, and I'm just wondering if that's going to remain or not.
Yeah, so your property, is it the one that's the most northwest
Yeah, it's the big chunk along the creek there, yeah.
on
On,
the
on the northwest side, correct.
Yeah,
Behind the hydro and then the junkyard there are, I'm just in front of it, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess I would have to double check what the minimum lot size is currently and then what the proposed minimum lot size, because I think that's kind of what you're getting after is what you're.
Yeah, I knew there wasn't gonna be commercial. When I bought this property, my intention was to preserve it and make sure that it wasn't gonna be a commercial development. I'm very, I want to protect the creek. I want to protect the environment, absolutely. And so I would, my thoughts were, like yurt living, put it into 3 chunks, and there could be, single family dwellings like a yurt or something like that. And also have composting toilets, because there's no sewer facility. And rather than put the infrastructure in, I'm sure composting toilets would work. There's water already to the property, but no sewer.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a setback from the creek of 30 meters, which is nice, because then you could build a road along there at that 30-meter mark, and so make it into like a berm to protect for the flood, if there's flooding. It has never flooded since I've owned it. And it's 8 years now. There's never been any flooding. So, and there's no berm there that the railway people built at one time. It's hidden by all the trees now, but. But yeah, it's I fell in love with the property. We were founded by accident. We were just going through town on a vacation one year, and signs up for the property, and the mill was scheduled to be closed, and so it's going to turn into a tourist town at one time. And then we started looking for a say, well, we had some time. Let's take a see what they got for property. And we ended up seeing this property, and we fell in love with it, and we ended up getting it. And our intention, my wife and I, is to preserve it. We don't want to see it go to commercial use. It should never go to commercial use.
Yeah, I would love to have a chat with you one day, Richard, maybe, so that we can get into some of this stuff, because that is such an interesting and special property. I agree. And yeah, I think it would be really fun to see what opportunities you could have, and it sounds like you've got some really great ideas that are compatible kind of with the proposed zoning and stuff, where it's kind of suggesting that those are, areas that have environmental significance to this community. So yeah, I think those all sound like really cool ideas, and we should touch base sometime.
Absolutely. I intended to hopefully be able to make a trip up this summer, and then we could talk face to face. Absolutely. Yeah, because it's a beautiful piece of property up there, and I'd like to see it remain that way. And they did some fisheries came in. They took out the old creosote logs. They put in nice fish ladders in there, and so that the salmon are back way up in that creek right along the property. It's absolutely beautiful. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's pretty special that you have Pacific salmon that come that far.
They didn't before. They would stop at they wouldn't come that far up. They were at the viewing, on the other side of the highway, but they never came all the way up the creek past that property until after the fisheries came in and fixed it up.
Wow, that's pretty neat. Yeah, I believe we just transferred the urban reserve zone over to environmental because it wasn't functioning as we saw it as urban reserve, which is typically urban reserve is used for future development lands. Mm-hmm. And so there was only one property in the village where it was being used for urban reserve lands. So we changed that. We are proposing to change that property to more an appropriate zone that would facilitate development because it's developable parcel, like urban self-development. And then the urban reserve, the rest of the urban reserve lands are proposed to kind of just function as they were, and the regulations essentially stay the same, if I recall, Megan, that we weren't proposing too many changes to those numbers. So we'll have a look again, just in terms of existing and then propose to. Yeah.
But yeah, and I would like to, I'm saying that because I like to carve it up. I don't need 30 acres. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
3 lots of 10 acres each is fine.
Yeah. Yeah, we can look at that.
Yeah. And for the town, I mean, Megan, I did mention this to a previous administrator you had, that, you know, that property behind the hydro station, like there to the towards the creek, you know, that little, it's land that I wouldn't make use of ever. And the city, you know, I'm willing to sell that, carve that off and sell it to the town. So you own it outright forever, you know?
You're talking about the part of your property that
It's got like, it's got that dog leg on it, I feel, you know, at the just as you come off Main Street.
so that the bit kind of connects with Main Street.
Yeah, that right, all that in behind those is part of my property. Yes.
Okay.
I come right up to Main Street, right along the creek there. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, we'll definitely have to have a chat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Richard.
Okay, very good. This is excellent. Yeah.
Helen had a question on the south properties here, and to clarify that this property here proposed to be C4, Highway Tourist Commercial, which I believe is what it presently is, or it's similar to Highway Commercial zoning, I believe. And then the proposal as present, but we've heard some feedback from Helen on this, that the property to the south would be designated as light industrial, as it's presently being used for what you may consider light industrial uses. And the village is short on industrial land. From a municipal perspective, industrial land is usually financially sustainable and usually a bit of a financial plus for a lot of municipalities. And the village at present time doesn't have any zoned industrial land. And so throughout this process, we identified that would be a need. There is industrial parks within the surrounding rural municipality, but those are not benefiting the village financially. They're benefiting the region, but not benefiting the village financially, and the need for jobs. And so industrial areas, especially light ones that don't have a lot of impacts offsite, are part of a complete community often. And so it's something to consider somewhere in the village. The reason for this southwest parcel being proposed for light industrial is that it is physically removed from a lot of other places in the village and has the highway access, and is presently being used for some light industrial purposes as we understand it. So not sure, Megan, if I'm getting all of Helen's questions here.
Yeah, I think her main, my understanding of what kind of what she's looking for is, like you said, so you've explained that kind of like the purpose of industrial lands, the need of industrial land within the village. I think one of her big concerns was kind of like adjacent uses. So she thinks, you know, like perhaps there's not super compatible adjacent uses. So we've got residential, then it goes highway commercial, and then industrial, which I mean are not always great neighbors, but I think that those are big chunks of undeveloped land. So it's kind of it's hard, unless they're all the same, it's hard to maybe have them be super compatible uses. But I'm not sure what you think about that.
I know, Michael, we visited with Helen and we walked the land. The highway commercial would accommodate the an idea of perhaps a campground, RV resort there with the nice restaurant in front, obviously on the highway.
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts on the highway commercial piece, the light industrial piece from a community planning standpoint?
Yeah, we wanted to, you know, and thank you for visiting with us, Helen. It was a good visit, and we realized that you had a wonderful, call it an RV resort right behind your restaurant because you had a former golf course. So the greens are perfect. You just have to loop a road. So we wanted to accommodate your future concept. At the same time, they're both, your location is just excellent along the highway. So from a both commercial and industrial side of things, it gives you both value to the village and value to you in terms of, especially if you're the only game in town. And as the community grows, a lot of industry now is cleaner. It isn't the same nauseous. In other words, there's not smokestacks and so forth. And I think within the zoning bylaw, there's accommodation. If there is industrial, naturally it would require buffering to adjoining uses and so forth. So in summary, it accommodates the existing use you have and then future aspirations in terms of commercial and industrial. And we believe, again, I can't really indicate plus or minus, but it's both a benefit to you and the village.
Exactly. And then Helen has a question on the OCP map. Oh, okay. Now I see your question. So her question is in regards to the green here, which is noted here as country residential. So that should be, I believe, identified as highway commercial. So that's a mapping error. So good catch, Helen. We'll definitely investigate that to match this highway commercial zoning proposed. So, and Fraser, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and just a note on that, Jonathan. I remember we chatted about it and thought we had two minds at the point saying extend the existing rural residential down and complete it, and that the RV resort still could be accommodated within that. But you know, in looking at the intentions, Helen's intentions, I think the highway commercial is more appropriate to that, and therefore not the same as the rural, the country residential designation. So you're right. I think we should change it.
Yeah, I think we did discuss this, and it might just be a bit of confusion around the map, because I know we talked about having this be more of a rural mixed use area. So that would allow for some commercial, some residential. I'm just trying to find.
That's a good point, Fraser, because I know Jonathan and I had discussed it. I left it with Jonathan and you to, so it might, you know, again, I'm thinking of that, you know, it's again, a very deep lot, and highway commercial generally is stripped along the highway. I mean, that's its intention, highway commercial along the highway. This is a very deep lot. So we didn't want it to, for instance, if it was sold, the entire area consumed by a shopping center or something like that, because it's not intended that way. It's intended to have highway commercial frontage, but in behind be more compatible with the country residential. So this could be, as long as it's clear in the language that that isn't its intention. I'm not sure what Megan thinks in terms of, Megan will be the implementer of this OCP and zoning bylaw, and we want to give her the tools with clear language so it's not misinterpreted or exploited.
I think that summarizes it well. We'll work with you, Helen. We're on side with your ideas. We believe they're compatible with the direction of the village, and so thanks for continuing to chime in, and apologies to us on the mapping, and we'll get that cleared up. Any other questions before we log off? Not hearing any?
No,
oh,
none here.
Excellent. Thanks, Richard.
Okay.
So not hearing any, let's all take a break, and we'll see you again sometime.
Okay, thanks again, folks.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Good night. Thanks for joining us.
And thank you, Megan and Amy, for all your setup and organization. much.
No problem.
Hey, good night, everyone.
Are we gonna stay on, Amy, to make sure we've got this chat saved?
I think we're good. I've been sort of copying and pasting as we go, so.
Okay.
Great.
And I've just been screenshotting mine just to make sure I've got it, and I'll see if I can actually like officially export it here.